Hey guys, it's towniesimbuilds here, and welcome back to another episode of Sims 4 Real Lore. In this series, we dive into fascinating destinations from around the world, shrouded in history, mystery, and oftentimes quite a bit of spookiness. Today's episode explores the abandoned island of Chacachacare, a lost modern relic of the Caribbean surrounded by death, mystery, and alleged hauntings. From its troubled past as a leprosarium, to its new reputation as a paranormal hotspot, what secrets lie within the walls of this forgotten facility? Before diving into today's episode, this video will cover topics regarding the supernatural and paranormal, as well as some unsettling causes of death, so please keep that in mind while watching. On another note, I am not fully versed in some of the languages mentioned throughout this video, however, I will do my best to pronounce these different names for you guys. Starting off today's tale, the island of Chacachacare is located in the Caribbean Sea, in the country of Trinidad and Tobago. Named by Native Americans who originally inhabited its grounds, the island's name stems from the word shaka-shaka, an indigenous term for cotton. The island was allegedly spotted by Western explorers as early as 1498 by Christopher Columbus, who named the island El Caracol, or the Snail. Eventually, the island would later be settled by the Spaniards, who used the island for whaling and cotton plantations. The island would then become British territory in 1797, where sugar, coconut, and cocoa would become prominent exports for the British Empire. While the island of Chacachacare would bring many economic and agricultural benefits, Trinidad would be impacted by the growing spread of leprosy. By definition, the World Health Organization defines leprosy as a chronic infectious disease stemming from Mycobacterium leprae, predominantly affecting the skin and peripheral nerves and causing progressive permanent disabilities if left untreated. Most notably, however, were the lesions and deformities the disease was known to create in those who contracted it. By the year 1814, residents infected with leprosy, otherwise known as lepers, were said to commune near Trinidad's current capital, Port of Spain. However, officials grew concerned by the growing number of lepers. Eventually, they sought to create an asylum where lepers could be housed separately from non-infected residents. Worsening the situation was a growing number of immigrants entering Trinidad, emigrating from a variety of countries including India, China, and Portugal. Many of these laborers were indentured servants who traded their manual services for eventual land, a direct response to the lack of local laborers who had now become infected by leprosy. With an influx of about 170,000 immigrants from 1842 to 1917, Trinidad would eventually open its first leper asylum in 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪, a coastal city near Port of Spain. Unfortunately, within the decades of Trinidad's massive immigration, the country would suffer gravely due to the increasing spread of leprosy. The year 1868 would see the arrival of the Dominican Sisters of St. Catherine of Siena, a group of 15 medicine-practicing nuns. The nuns were brought to 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 to assist with approximately 200 to 300 patients at the leprosarium. However, despite Trinidad's best efforts to obtain help with the outbreak, many of the nuns would soon perish from the spread of infection, being afflicted not only by leprosy, but also yellow fever in 1869. Of the 15 nuns who arrived originally, only a few lived beyond their first years at 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪's leprosarium. One of these nuns was Saint Marie Augustine Cartier, who managed to survive the 1869 yellow fever epidemic. She would continue to work for 28 years, caring for leprosy patients within the asylum. By the year 1915, more drastic actions would take place to quell the spread of leprosy throughout Trinidad. Within this same year, a federal mandate would require any individual who had contracted leprosy to isolate themselves within their home. However, this mandate did not prove to be effective, and as a result, the colonial Trinidadian government sought to relocate lepers off the main island. Among these options was none other than Chacachacare Island. Formerly the home to many profitable crops, sugar mills, and plantations, Chacachacare would experience a radical transformation. Previously home to a health spa, lighthouse, church, and stone pier, the island of Chacachacare would later see the construction of a hospital, storehouses, and patient quarters from 1922 to 1926. Allegedly, the Trinidadian government proceeded with these construction projects in private, utilizing tax funds and transferring patients to the new facilities away from public eye. The former facilities in 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 were said to be intentionally burned down, an effort to potentially eradicate any traces of leprosy. Much like 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪, the newly created leper island of Chacachacare would receive assistance from French Dominican nuns. Several reports of their experiences on the island were noted in personal diaries discovered by Sister 𝗪𝗓𝗔𝗡𝗚𝗏 decades later in 1993. According to Marie's translations, the earliest nuns to set foot on Chacachacare Island noted 1922 as their year of arrival. In this same year, patients also began arriving on the island, escorted from 𝗪𝗓𝗏 to Chacachacare by local police. The nuns, patients, and supplies were all transferred via boat. Some reports even indicated that healthier patients assisted with the island's renovations. While the new facilities of Chacachacare Island seemed hopeful, the island would soon prove to be a place of further loss and misfortune. Arriving on the island, the risk of leprosy contraction was high. However, this risk was only worsened by a lack of both running water and electricity. Additionally, the island also bore the risk of malaria, mainly due to a sizable population of mosquitoes carrying the disease. Over the course of just 4 years, the tragic deaths of 𝗪𝗓𝗏 would repeat themselves once more at Chacachacare Island. A new chapel was constructed for the assisting nuns in 1926. However, a small cemetery would also accompany the project. Unfortunately, 10 members of the original convent had perished within this short time frame. Among them was Prioress Mother Marie, who passed away only 3 months after her arrival on Chacachacare. Another member of the convent, Sister 𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗛𝗏, would also succumb to illness on the island and die only 2 years later. While the members of the convent originally came to Chacachacare as caregivers, many of the nuns unfortunately became patients themselves. Among them was Sister 𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗏. Unfortunately, after contracting leprosy, Sister Rose was forced to live within the island's leper facilities for a period of 18 years. Among other members of the convent who fell ill included Sister Rosa Rollins, who originally transferred from her position at the 𝗪𝗓𝗏 facilities. Another convent member, Sister Ina, contracted leprosy in 1935, along with Sister Jeanne de Saint-Dominique Escoffier, who suffered from a skin infection and paralysis during her 15 years at the Chacachacare facilities. Sister Jeanne was originally misdiagnosed as having leprosy, and as a result, had been isolated from her convent for many years. Unfortunately, these are only a few of the recorded convent members who provided their services on the island. Death and sickness had become commonplace on Chacachacare, with both convent members and leprosy patients losing their lives. Over the course of decades, the island of Chacachacare would experience many setbacks, but also signs of hope in years to come. One recorded storm in 1928 proved catastrophic to the facilities, destroying the roof of the convent as well as the living quarters comprising the lepers' village where patients had been staying. The effects of World War II in the early to mid-1940s proved additionally problematic, disrupting regular food and supply deliveries to Chacachacare. While agriculture on the island was a possible solution, laws restricted leprosy patients from both farming and fishing, making the food shortage even more troubling. Fortunately, following the end of World War II, the island would see many improvements, including government-appointed nurses to aid the convent, electric generators, and newly developed drugs to aid in the treatment of leprosy. These improvements would be further augmented in the year 1950, which would see the arrival of surgeons specializing in facial reconstruction. The Trinidadian government also brought new aid to the original Dominican sisters who arrived on the island, enlisting the Sisters of Mercy, a convent of nuns trained as nurses. Unfortunately, the Sisters of Mercy reportedly left the island only 5 years later in 1955. Some speculate that the sisters left due to difficult and dangerous conditions on Chacachacare, while others claim that a revolt from the leprosy patients over certain living conditions may have deterred the convent from staying. Throughout the course of its operations as a leprosy facility, the island of Chacachacare would see over 2,000 patients, spanning the course of approximately 70 years. The facilities would officially close in the year 1984, with remaining patients returning to the Trinidadian mainland. Currently, the vast buildings comprising the Chacachacare leprosy facilities remain abandoned. However, the ill-fated deaths of both patients and caregivers alike have left an eerie mark on the island to this day. While the facilities of Chacachacare Island have been left defunct and vacant for 40 years, Trinidadian locals fear the island and advise anyone to stay away from it. On one note, many locals believe that the island still holds traces of leprosy, making the island contagious to all visitors. More disturbingly, however, are stories of numerous supernatural and paranormal experiences that reportedly surround the island itself. Among the island's most famous apparitions is the ghost of a nun that had perished on Chacachacare. However, her exact identity and backstory remain a mystery. Urban legends surrounding the nun's apparition suggest that she had possibly forfeited her life, stating that she had been romantically involved with a Venezuelan sailor, a fisherman, or priest that had been working on the island. Some variations of this legend suggest that she was with child, and, given the illicit circumstances surrounding her relationship, may have become distraught. However, the details are unclear and unconfirmed. The history and sighting of her ghost have earned her the name the White Lady of Chacachacare, a spirit known by many Trinidadian locals. Despite the mystery of the White Lady of Chacachacare, numerous unidentified spirits have also been seen throughout the island. Among popular haunted locations on the island include the nuns' quarters, the convent cemetery, the chapel, the doctor's house, the infirmary, and the leper colony living quarters, among others. Allegedly, an unknown male spirit also appears outside, near the remains of the island's pier. However, any specific information regarding his apparition remains unknown. While the identities of these various spirits remain a mystery, various local organizations have shared their paranormal experiences with Chacachacare Island. Most notably, members of Trinidad's Coast Guard had previously inhabited the former leprosy facilities during the 1990s. At this time, remaining structures were temporarily converted into offices and living spaces for the Coast Guard. However, the servicemen reported a series of hauntings that ultimately led to their departure from the island after only 6 months. Their accounts were provided to paranormal investigators of Trinidad and Tobago, which will also be referred to as P.I.T.T. Reportedly, the servicemen experienced unsettling physical contact from unseen entities. Some reported the feeling of being held down while asleep, while others felt a hand push their back as they ascended the staircase. The activity on the island is so unsettling, in fact, that local fishermen stay away from the shores of Chacachacare, regardless of the time of day. Several tourists and visitors to the island have also shared their experiences of Chacachacare, further confirming the reports of supernatural activity on the island. Multiple accounts shared on the travel site 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏shed shed further light into some of the island's mysterious paranormal anomalies. A user by the name of Ornelia M. shares her story of an evening camping trip on the island. Reportedly lodging in the abandoned doctor's house with her uncle, Ornelia was awakened in the middle of the night by the figure of a man. Most distinctly, however, was the watch on his wrist. Ornelia's uncle would encounter the figure of the man once more in the second story of the building. However, the man proceeded to vanish without any sign of interaction. Ornelia further recalled a heavy presence lingering in the air surrounding the property. User Nikolai F. presents another report of eerie activity within the main abandoned house on the property. Reportedly, Nikolai had been camping within the house with 7 other friends. However, one of his friends was awakened by an eerie series of footsteps coming from the second floor of the house. Most unsettling, however, was the fact that the property was allegedly empty, apart from the 7 other campers, who were all asleep in the same room at this time. Another user by the name of 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 describes a strange alleged incident on the island. Upon one of multiple trips to Chacachacare, 𝗪𝗏 brought his friend to accompany him in his travels. At one point on their trip to the island, 𝗪𝗏's friend proceeded to explore the nun cemetery on his own. Sometime afterwards, 𝗪𝗏 witnessed his friend running back down the cliff, exclaiming that a woman wearing red lipstick had taken his glasses. 𝗪𝗏 was initially skeptical of his friend's claim and his particularly odd behavior. However, in one of the abandoned houses, 𝗪𝗏 discovered a tube of red lipstick and a box of matches. Reportedly, the items would mysteriously reappear, located in the same position that 𝗪𝗏 had originally found them. On another occasion, while exploring the island, the group was heading back towards the abandoned chapel. According to 𝗪𝗏, what should have been a 5-minute walk spiraled into a 6-hour trek through the jungle. Inexplicably, the team had become lost on what should have been a brief hike back. Despite exploring the island in a large group of 12 people, 𝗪𝗏 noted an intense aura surrounding the dilapidated property. This claim was also mirrored by user Bateman J, who, despite not having a potential paranormal experience, claims that the island had an eerie energy to it, almost as if he wasn't allowed to be there. Throughout the island's more modern history, Chacachacare has been examined by various paranormal investigation teams, apart from the paranormal investigators of Trinidad and Tobago. Most famously, the island was featured on an episode of the US television show Ghost Hunters International. This 2011 episode featured members of P.I.T.T, including Leslie Sweetman and Fernando Rodas. During their initial consultation with P.I.T., both Leslie and Fernando described their paranormal experiences on the island, including disembodied voices, footsteps, and apparitions. These activities were mostly noted in the old administration building, the nuns' quarters, the chapel, and the remains of the infirmary. Additionally, P.I.T. confirms visitor reports of an overwhelming negative energy within the abandoned property, one that has caused some to feel an immense sense of grief and sadness. Local Trinidadian 𝗪𝗓𝗏𝗏 shared her experiences on Ghost Hunters International, claiming that she had seen the dark apparition of a man on Chacachacare Island. He appeared one evening in one of the building's doorways, and, through moonlight, she was able to make out the silhouette of the figure. The figure then proceeded to move away from the doorway and disappear, with no traces whatsoever. Throughout the episode, one particular location of interest was the abandoned chapel, in which P.I.T. reported footsteps, shuffling, and odd cold spots. P.I.T. further confirmed the reports of the Trinidadian Coast Guard from the 1990s. Ian Cross, a retired Coast Guard squadron commander, recalled the incident. Reportedly, Ian found the soldiers in the chapel sitting back-to-back clutching their rifles. Upon questioning them, the soldiers collectively told Ian of the ghostly encounters they experienced. Among the more unsettling cases, however, were the soldiers who claimed to have been pinned down by an invisible force. During the investigation of the chapel, the team reported hearing faint footsteps entering the building. Some sources state that the chapel was the alleged place in which the nun forfeited her life. However, this theory, along with her identity, remain unconfirmed. Apart from the chapel, P.I.T. claims that the nuns' quarters experience high levels of paranormal activity. Unlike the more negative energies in other parts of the property, Fernando reports a more peaceful energy throughout their former living space. Fernando and the Ghost Hunters team attempted to communicate with the spirits of the nuns in French. However, despite what sounded like a faint voice, the team was unable to pick up any additional audio or visual evidence. The group had similar limited results while investigating the nun cemetery, which P.I.T. indicated as being more paranormally active when the cemetery gates are left open. One notable instance in the nuns' quarters, however, was a report of an investigator being gently pushed while ascending the stairs. One investigator claimed to feel a tightness in his chest that occurred twice while in the hallway. However, no visible or audible evidence was captured in this process. While these accounts are hard to verify, these instances do mirror the experiences previously shared by P.I.T. Fernando and Leslie had reported that their backs had been touched by an unseen entity while walking up the same staircase previously. However, the identity of this alleged entity or entities remains unknown. Shifting their investigation to the abandoned living quarters of the leper colony, Leslie Sweetman of P.I.T. indicates prior reports of footsteps, voices, strange noises, and even the sounds of children playing. One of the Ghost Hunters investigators reported hearing the word "go" in their audio equipment, as if requesting the team to leave. Not long after, another investigator felt a brief shove on her backpack, followed by the words "get out" that appeared in the team's EVP recordings. These claims mirror the reports of physical contact P.I.T. had experienced previously. The same investigator proceeded to witness a dark figure passing by. However, the team was unable to capture any footage. Her claims also mirror the experiences previously shared by local 𝗪𝗓𝗏𝗏. While the findings of P.I.T. and the Ghost Hunters team did not reveal more information about the island's various spirits, the identity of the White Lady of Chacachacare was finally unearthed. Consulting with local Trinidadian Father Rashad, the team was able to verify the nun's identity as Sister Mary Luigi, who appeared in the preserved church records. While the circumstances surrounding her death remain up for debate, Sister Mary Luigi was a real nun who came to Chacachacare Island in the early 1950s. Originally, Sister Mary Luigi was a Sister of Mercy, a member of the convent sent to the island to assist the remaining Dominican nuns. Interestingly, Sister Mary Luigi is one of only 10 nuns buried in the convent's small cemetery. For reasons unknown, it is said that Sister Mary was required to relocate to the nearby country of Guyana. However, she was reportedly unhappy with this mandate. Unfortunately, not long after, her body was later discovered in the ocean. To this day, it is not known if Sister Mary suffered from an accidental drowning or if she had consciously forfeited her life. According to some tales, a fisherman discovered a white nun's veil, also known as a habit, floating in the water the day her body was discovered. Others, however, attribute this discovery to another nun who may have forfeited her life on the island. Regardless, the apparition of what most sources agree to be Sister Mary Luigi has become more colloquially known as the White Lady of Chacachacare. In some instances, her spirit is said to carry a lantern, traversing the grounds of the island by moonlight. While the paranormal activity tied to Chacachacare Island has been witnessed over several decades, the concept of ghosts has a deeper connection to Trinidadian folklore. Collectively, ghosts are also referred to as 𝗪𝗓𝗓s, a supernatural entity. 𝗪𝗓𝗓s have roots in various cultures, including Africa, East India, and indigenous peoples, with particularly strong ties to Central Africa's Bantu folklore. Much like ghosts, 𝗪𝗓𝗓s are said to be the spirits of living individuals who have passed away, but have been unable to cross over into a spiritual plane. 𝗪𝗓𝗓s possess many of the same qualities as ghosts, often having supernatural abilities, taking the form of humans or animals, as well as being heavily tied to feelings of grief, loss, and sorrow. Author Mac Little sheds further light on the folklore of 𝗪𝗓𝗓s, detailing their ties to the 𝗪𝗓𝗓 religion. Examining the religion further, 𝗪𝗪𝗓 is a belief system encompassing a variety of African religions, which eventually culminated in the Caribbean islands as a result of the West African slave trade. Despite troubled origins, 𝗪𝗪𝗓 became a source of hope and protection for enslaved peoples in the years following its inception. An academic article published by Northeastern University describes 𝗪𝗪𝗓 as having two core fundamental paths. The first path is a focus on medicine and healing, with remedies obtained through plants, animals, and other natural means. The second path, however, focuses on the practice of the supernatural, involving various spells and protective methods. These methods enabled practitioners to not only attract fortune and prosperity, but to also ward off malevolent entities. Among these entities, however, are 𝗪𝗓𝗓s, which can sometimes bear ill intent towards the living. According to the 𝗪𝗪𝗓 faith, it is said that 𝗪𝗓𝗓s are a result of two souls within a person. Upon death, one soul leaves Earth and enters the afterlife, while the other remains on Earth with the body after it is buried. Within days, a 𝗪𝗓𝗓, or the second soul, emerges from the burial site. Unlike Western interpretations of ghosts, however, the 𝗪𝗓𝗓 is said to appear indistinguishable from a living human. Likewise, 𝗪𝗓𝗓s who take the form of animals look identical to their living counterparts, with no signs of transparency or luminescence usually associated with ghosts. In conjunction with the paranormal activity seen on Chacachacare Island, it is likely that the former leprosarium is inhabited by 𝗪𝗓𝗓s deriving from the deceased. Spirits seen and heard throughout the island may include the nuns who perished within the facilities, most notably Sister Mary Luigi, along with other members of the convent. Former leprosy patients and other workers on Chacachacare may account for other unidentified apparitions, such as the male figure by the docks or the strange shadow figures reported by some witnesses. While the island of Chacachacare remains abandoned since its years as a leprosarium, the stories surrounding supernatural activity remain a staple of modern Trinidadian folklore. Visitors to the island, including tourists and professional paranormal teams, still explore the ruins to this day. Whether it's the remains of the old chapel, the nuns' quarters, or even the former doctor's house, the island of Chacachacare will continue to be a place of mystery for all who dare to visit it. Alright guys, and that is a wrap on the abandoned island of Chacachacare, and of course, all the alleged hauntings tied to it. Now in real life, the facilities on this island are quite vast, so for this video I did choose to recreate the doctor's house specifically. I do think it is fairly close to the one in real life, but unfortunately there were no clear reference images for the inside, so the interior is mostly my own creation. Of course, I hope you guys enjoyed learning about the lore behind this location, and just like always, this is still a no CC, no mod limited pack build that will be available on the Sims 4 gallery for download. I'll leave you guys now with the final lot specs, along with the final cinematic shots, so you can see how everything turned out in the end. And of course, just like always, this has been 𝗪𝗏𝗡𝗚 signing off. Thank you so much for watching, guys.